coming up on Not the End, NDE.
But all the pain I gave away in my life accrued to me. And in this state of being, there was this other point of view that was always being shown and spoken and vibrated, and it was love, 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 mercy, forgiveness, welcome. And I experienced myself not being judged, but judging myself in comparison to this unlimited, unprecedented, unconditional, eternal love that had always loved me and known me and gone through every experience with me and loved me no matter what I did, no matter what I said. And all I had to do was accept it. And as I accepted it, I saw all of humanity's sinful nature, all of our brokenness, and each individual brokenness was in comparison to this unconditional, unlimited love and purity of being. And we were all collectively so small, as thin as a single page of paper, and our differences were as thin as that in comparison to an ocean depth of divine purity.
Many have died and returned to tell of their near-death experiences. Their incredible stories reveal to the living that this is not the end.
Hi, I'm Peter Panagore, and I died in 1980 while ice climbing in Alberta, Canada, in March, in about 10 feet of snow. It was my first ice climb. I'd been a mountaineer, I'd been rock climbing and climbing all over the Rocky Mountains and all sorts of eastern mountains for most of my life, in all seasons. So this was not a new adventure for me, except for the ice climbing part of it. We had been out snow caving for 8 days before in British Columbia, and we came back to Alberta to do this one-day ice climb somewhere north of Banff and south of another town whose name I can't recall off the top of my head. Anyway, I made a mistake. I chose to climb with inappropriate equipment. I had an axe and a hammer instead of two axes, and that slowed my climb down significantly on this world-famous climb. We weren't the only team on the ice that day, but we were the last team to start. And my climb was so slow that we realized that we were in a precarious and dangerous situation before we even reached the top of our climb, which was 500 or 600 feet up. I had to continue to grip the hammer with all of my might, unlike the axe where I could dangle and rest on a strap around my wrist. And so my muscles burned out quickly, and the swing of the hammer, which topped out at my knuckles, just above them, maybe an inch, was much shorter than the swing with the hammer, which was significantly longer. So my speed of my climb was shortened by the stress of my arm, and the stride of my climb was shortened on every single part of the ascent by the length of my hammer, which meant that by the time we reached the top of the climb, the death was looming pretty heavily over us. I should add also that Tim was a certified lead ice climber. And like I said, I'd been messing around with ropes for several years at this point. I was not a novice to heights and danger in the winter, and any season for that matter. We reached the top of the climb. We realized we were stuck. Hypothermia set in immediately with violent physical shivers. And I knew, because I was on the National Ski Patrol, I knew what the result was going to be. So either we were going to stay where we were and freeze to death for sure, or we were going to fight our way down the 3-pitch climb, 3-pitch rappel, in order to save our own lives. We were alone. All the other teams had left. The sun set, the temperature dropped 30 degrees, and it got colder through the night. I could tell you the whole harrowing tale, and it's high-adventure harrowing. In the dark, on a sheer cliff, fighting the frostbite and the freezing of lips and eyeballs and muscles and tongues and brains, and stealing my reason from me and coordination. And my climbing partner, Tim, was in the same situation. We were roped together. We had several major problems that we had to overcome that, had we not, we would have definitely died where we were. By the time we reached the top of the final rappel, it was sometime before morning, and I had advanced in my hypothermia to I couldn't feel my feet anymore. The fire in my toes were gone. My muscles were stiff from the cold. Like I said, my eyeballs were freezing. My mammalian, my reptilian brain and the core, the deep down inside my brain had taken over my body, and I was an animal striving for survival. My brain somehow, my rational brain, shut off, and I was left with this very instinctual necessity of living. Tim was to my left. We were harnessed into the mountain. It was the first time we were safe from falling all night. There were iron pins epoxied in with carabiners and straps that we clipped to our harnesses, so we were going to fall off this cliff, sheer face. It was the practice cliff on this mountain called Lower Weeping Wall. It's called Cirrus Mountain, Lower Weeping Wall. And I had the rope, and by this point we were completely in our own worlds. The effort it took to move drained the energy from our bodies in a physical way that I could feel the expenditure of my remaining fuel. And the cold was pressing on me, getting colder and colder. My fuel was funneled into my physical life because moving kept me warm, which consumed my fuel, which made death come closer as the temperature dropped. And so I had the rope in this situation. I took off my gloves. I had frostbite. I have fingers. They're all there. I had damage to all my fingertips. So I had to tie the blistered fingers tie the knot to my harness with one end of the rope. I took the other end of the rope and I tossed it out around this corner, this dark crag we had descended down, at the top of which there was an iron pin epoxied in, through which we strung the rope and descended. And I intended to pull the rope down, and I grabbed the rope and I gave it a tug, and as I tugged it, somewhere up above, it jammed between some kind of V in the rocks, and I pulled, and a couple inches and it stuck, and I pulled harder and it stuck further, and I pulled harder and it got stuck even more. And now we're in a situation where we can't ascend and we can't descend, and we're on a ledge and there's nowhere to go. We were on rock, but we couldn't climb the rock. I didn't have climbing shoes, and my hands were frozen, and it was dark, and we knew in this circumstance that we were going to die, and there was just really no way around it. I came to this understanding that I wasn't getting out of this situation, even though I'd fought my way all night long. And I began to think about my family. I began to think about God. I began to think about death. And as I surrendered to the inevitable, I had this peace come on me, and my reptilian brain shut off. I accepted where I was. I kept pulling on the rope, and I'd fall asleep, smack on the rock. I had a helmet, stand back up, pull on the rope. I wasn't giving up, but I surrendered to the inevitable, even though I was trying still. And then I stood up this last time. And I should set the scene a little bit here. Down below us, across the Icefields Parkway, we could hear the Saskatchewan River running and bubbling and churning underneath the ice and the snow. And there was a beautiful sky with a billion different colored stars. And I could see the mountain across the way in the moonlight. It had finally risen, and I could see beauty everywhere I was. And I had this calmness about me. And I stood back up and I pulled on the rope. And this time, as I pulled on the rope, instead of the curtain of sleep dropping like a stage curtain, boom, to darkness, and I'd be asleep, it was a big circle of darkness, and it collapsed on me like a stage light spot, only it was darkness, getting down to darkness. And I was wondering, as I thought about what I was seeing, I started looking at it with great intensity, trying to see what this thing was. And as I looked, my vision got smaller and smaller, and I was wondering, what the heck is going on here? I've never seen such a thing before. And then it went, and as it went to darkness, I thought, oh, I must be falling asleep again in some sort of weird way. But instead, when the darkness struck, I was popped out of the front of my body, and my entire world around me became darkness. And I felt like I was standing, though I knew that I mustn't be standing because I'd fallen asleep and I must have fallen, but I felt like I was upright. And in front of me was this vast velvet darkness, this deep, tactile. It was thick darkness that extended a great distance, and a galaxy across, I don't know, something like that. And in the far, far, far distance, as I'm standing there wondering what's going on, a pinprick of light appeared. And this pinprick of light, the size of a single star, came rushing across this vast distance, faster than the speed of light. It just covered this distance, and as it came to me, it expanded, it got bigger, and it communicated directly to me, non-linguistically, no conceptualizations, no language, no words, directly to myself, saying, "You're coming with me. You're mine." And I responded with, "I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere." And I mustered up my willpower and I put it up like a shield in front of me, and it rushed toward me, filling the darkness with illumination, and reached and plucked me like a daisy and absorbed me inside itself and dashed back the direction it had come with me inside. And there was this severing that occurred. I'd been out of my body before many times from childhood, pulled out by divine grace, by the same angelic being, which was a consciousness unto itself, not a winged creature, but an energy field that was like a projection of infinity itself, superpositioned, speaking for the divine in this limited form come to collect me. But there was this severing this time where the umbilical cord of my light body to my physical body was severed. And I was inside of this consciousness in like I could describe it as a transparent styrofoam peanut packing memory foam comfort. And I was completely being fed contentment and well-being. And I could see in every direction. I could even see my own self. And I had no physical form of matter. I was made of metaphorically light particles, one shaped like a humanoid I was. And I could see from another point of view. I could see from the outside like an eye, like God's eye, seeing me inside this, and this energy, angelic consciousness being rushed back up the way that it had come. And I could see me in it. But when I looked from the inside of the energy angel, I couldn't see the eye seeing me, but I could see the eye seeing me inside myself. And so I had this superposition going on. I was in two places at once, and I was rushed back up to this very edge where this little pinprick of light had first appeared to me. And at that edge, it unfolded, or I popped out into this greater darkness. And this greater darkness was universe in size. And I was the sun size in the middle of the universe. I was singularly consciousness, like a flaming ball of mind, but I had my feelings, and my sense of identity wasn't human anymore. My sense of identity was the totality of the light that I had always been. And I am a consciousness where I could see in every direction at once, like 10 million eyes. In this deep, dark space I was in, the size of the universe, was also simultaneously illuminated because I could see in it. And I wasn't a light big enough to illuminate anything other than my own proximity, but I could see the depth of the darkness. And there was an edge to the depth of the darkness, even though it was a universe away from me. There was this, like a shield, like I was in a womb inside of this vast entity, and I was alone, but I was content with myself, because I knew that this had been me. This had always been me. This was my truest me. I had not ever been a human being in reality. I had lived inside that, and that this was myself. And as I looked and wonder and acceptance of myself, I saw the darkness tear open, the edge of this darkness, beyond which I could not see because it was infinity, and I knew that it was infinity, and I was still somehow a finite creature, though my finitude was somehow much less limited than being human or in the universe. And as I looked, this darkness opened and this light poured out, and the light was the most beautiful, loving joy, wholeness, seduction I'd ever seen. And in the instant of my seeing it, and it was gigantic compared to me, and the instant of my seeing it, I wanted it, I knew it, and in that instant I had traveled to it in the flash of a thought, and I was in front of it, and it was this magnificent flow of white illumination that was alive. It was breathing all life from it. Every creation was coming from it and was in it. And simultaneously to the solidity of its singular light, it had all these 1 billion pixelations of color that were like individual stars of all different frequencies. If you see the satellite photos and x-rays and ultraviolets and all of these images of all of these spectrums, I could see with myself, and my thinking was me, and I wanted this. And as I wanted it, I touched it with my being, and it opened me and poured inside of me and expanded me, and it pulled me into itself. And I went through this whole series of experiences that I tell chronologically, even though all of this is in timelessness. And it's not like just the moment of time when you stop and you meditate and you slide into that place of non-thinking. It's all time that ever was, ever is, all in one's tiny, tiny, tiny space. And so everything happens at once. And I'm inside of this orb I am this orb inside of this flow of light, and I see in front of me, now I have again a more physicalized form of a humanoid shape being made of 1 trillion, septillion pixels of white light, but I can see in front of me this eyeball. And this eyeball is light itself, and it's seeing me, it's seeing into me. It has always seen into me. It's always been with me. It has always made me. It was my creator, and I am creation, and I am it. And it's seeing all of my life that I had just lived. And I am illuminated from top to bottom with its beauty, except for this little group of dark pixels that I try to hide because I have shame of action, and I coalesce them and try to tuck them not to be seen. But as soon as I grab them, I am folded into my own darkness. And inside of this darkness, I enter into a place where I experience all of the pain that I ever gave away in my entire life from the inside of each individual person that I had harmed in a chronological sequence, and feeling their feelings and thinking their thoughts and feeling their physical body and being them. Simultaneously, I was me and all of my life, giving them the pain that I intended to give them, and whatever circumstance it was, experiencing my physical body and my thinking and my emotions and my psychology, and the revel of handing wound to them, and the wound that I gave them turned out to be 10,000 times greater than the wound that I had thought that I was giving them, and it was flowing back into me. So all the pain that I gave away in my life, and I wasn't a bad guy, I was just a person, but all the pain I gave away in my life accrued to me. And in this state of being, there was this other point of view that was always being shown and spoken and vibrated, and it was love, 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 mercy, forgiveness, welcome. And I experienced myself not being judged, but judging myself in comparison to this unlimited, unprecedented, unconditional, eternal love that had always loved me and known me and gone through every experience with me and loved me no matter what I did, no matter what I said. And all I had to do was accept it. And as I accepted it, I saw all of humanity's sinful nature, all of our brokenness, and each individual brokenness was in comparison to this unconditional, unlimited love and purity of being. And we were all collectively so small, as thin as a single page of paper. And our differences were as thin as that in comparison to an ocean depth of divine purity. And I understood that the design of humanity, of biology, of the galaxy, of the universe, it's all in this reduction. And because of the very nature of the reduction, the impurity, which is not, I don't mean to use that negatively, but the impurity of it, the not fullness of it, creates this structure of the necessity of everything eats everything else here. In the center of our galaxy is a black hole sucking down stars. Galaxies collide. Mosquitoes give malaria. People eat plants, and apparently plants feel feelings from a study I just read. The whole thing is in this level of unavoidable brokenness, less thanness that we didn't design. And because I didn't design it, it wasn't my fault. And all I had to do was accept the love on offer, to listen to it. And it was like this huge tidal wave come crashing down on me. So much light and love and welcome and wholeness and healing that I couldn't not be caught up in its tumult. And it swept me into itself as soon as I accepted it. And then I was inflated with it. And I became a gigantic dirigible size of the supermassive star that was being infilled with this multiplicity of things: truth and beauty, love, joy, understanding, knowledge, wisdom, awe, bliss, paradise, love, light. And they were all one thing. And I was in unity with the light itself. And I reached this size where I had no longer separation from the light. I came to this edge, where the edge of communion and union, where there was this thin, thin, thin edge that I was still not in the fullness of the light itself. I was almost there in this union where I had no self. And in that moment, I became this pixel, a singular pixel of individual light that was entangled with a septillion other pixels of light, the depth and breadth and width unimaginable. And we were all pixels of the divine being, the multiple plurality of the light itself in communion with itself. And I was light itself. And as I'm in this state, I am shown my lower soul emerging from the darkness itself. And so I'm in this super high state, and way down below me in this vast universal womb of darkness, the deeper darkness of infinity opens again, and out of it comes this tube that is me, and it's my soul being birthed. I'm somehow inside of this womb of being, but I'm also, my origin is in the infinite. And as I have this long period where I'm just my soul, and then there's this really long time where there are all these little tiny marbles inside, like little tiny worlds inside of my soul. And each one of these individual worlds is me as an incarnate. And I see hundreds of them. And I see that I am this pixelization of light. I am this wholeness of being. I am this soul, this oversoul. And the bodies inside that I had lived and was living were not me. They were inhabited by me. And so I wanted to see, and was welcomed down inside, pulled down inside 2 little lives. In the first, I was in this space where I was a man walking down a road, and it was dusty, and I had sandals and hairy legs, and was dressed in a towel with a toga, something. And I was in front of a group of men, and we were all dark bearded and dark haired, and having conversation, and olively skinned, and having conversation about spirituality. And there was a little tiny house and some palm trees, and it was some kind of thoroughfare of commerce and movement. And there were other people on this wide lane. And they asked me a question in a language I understood, but I also understood to be a language that I had not spoken in my previous life, that I was a walk-in inside of this guy, that he was still living. And even though this life had preceded by many lives, the life I just finished, it was still happening. And I was in it. And as soon as I began to answer, I was pulled out of it. And then I was dropped back further in my chronology into some kind of tiny little lizard, maybe on Earth, maybe not. I have no idea, because I had a tiny, tiny little brain and I was in fear. I was in the shadow, staying still, and I was super small, and I could see light on these other objects, and I knew that I was being prey for a predator. And if I stayed still, I might survive. And then I was pulled out. And then I was somehow shrunken back again to a place where I could see my memory of my family life. And my sister had vanished when I was 14, run away, but broken my family in a lot of ways. And my mom and my dad were suffering greatly at this loss, this unresolved grief. And I could see them, and I said, what about my folks? And I was swept across the belly of this darkness to this like Higgs boson energy field where energy becomes matter, and part of me was stuck through, and I could see our entire universe and all of its webs of galaxies. And I was in this big space of darkness in between some galaxies, and I could see tens of thousands of them, millions of them. And my vision was then directed toward the origin of the universe, and out of the infinite darkness was pouring this light that was forming into matter that created the universe that I was living in, and all matter in it, all energy in it, everything interwoven with this light, meaning that everything is made at its very core out of this light. And as it was pouring out this light, it was pouring out all of these other universes, all these other dimensions, ba-boom, 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 one after the other, flipping them out. And there was this immensity to the whole thing, the immensity of all of these universes, each one individually gigantic, and the darkness itself, and all of this energy, all of it was woven, made of this divine light, which was then directed at me as love. The whole thing was made of love. The infinite itself, which I could not see into, was pouring out this unconditional, infinite love aimed through like a magnifying glass lens right at me. And I understood that everything is love, and that nothing is lost, and that I am love, and that love is all there is. And as this expanse is all directed at me, I felt like I was the chosen one. And as I feel this intensity, I see our Earth like a hologram, and inside of every single human being is the same light and love that I am experiencing in particularity. So it has this strange paradox of uniqueness and universality, and every drop of human being is utterly beloved, and I can see the light inside everyone. And no one can see it on Earth like I can. Everybody is under this huge fog, and they can't see what I can plainly see. And as I watch, I see my mom and my dad's faces come up from Earth, and there's two sets of them, mom and dad A, mom and dad B. And as I look, I see mom and dad, I see two lifelines for them, two lifetimes for them. And in the first one, I see them with me living. And with me living, their suffering is bad, but not so bad, compared to me dying, in which there's like a nuclear bombs go off in their lives. And it's just devastation. And I say to the divine, 99.9% of me is still inside the dark womb. And I say to the divine, do I have to stay here? Can I go back and help my parents not suffer this terrible fate? And can I come back here? And I can see also the length of every single one of my lives was a snap of a finger. And so I feel like I can go back and endure. And the voice without sound says to me, yes, you can come back here and be with me in this way. And I say, well, then I choose to live my life. And the voice says, you won't live your life. Throws me out like a baseball. And I travel back inside this angelic being, which is also God. And as I travel, I condense, I get denser, and I can see this huge beam of light going past us. And this beam, I looked back through the transparency of this angelic being, and I could see out of the deep darkness, I couldn't see into heaven anymore, but out of heaven came this beam of light, and I turned to look forward. And as I looked forward, this beam of light was in the center of 1,000,000 doors, and all of these doors were set like individual petals on a flower, and they radiated light to in intensity in the middle and to darkness to the outer edges. And there's 1,000,000 of them, and the voice of the divine in the angel said to me, choose light, choose a life. And I knew that it wanted me to choose the totality of the light, but I wanted some humanity, and I made choices in an instant, and a door, not in the fullness but near the fullness, opened, and I went down that tunnel, and down that tunnel inside were all these other doors, and all these other doorways led to all these other tunnels. And I reached the end of this tunnel through like a field of probability of lives I could live. And I reached the end of this tunnel still being carried by this angelic being who itself had taken on more physicality, I guess I could say, because I could see a body, and I could see a person shaking that body on this cliffside. I could see the darkness, but I didn't know who these people were or what was going on. And this angelic being like took a hand and pierced the body and opened it like an eye, and crushed my soul self down and shoved me in, twisting me to fit inside. And now I'm popped back inside this physical form, and I'm looking out through this hole, wondering what had just happened to me and why I made this choice and where I was going. And then I could see the angelic being, and I watched the hole close. And now I'm stuck inside this thing. I felt like a sarcophagus, and I felt my brain coming back online, like somebody was starting it up, and it kind of caught, and it started warming up, and I started to hear, and I could hear screaming, and I was unresolved. What is this noise? And then it became language. Don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die. And I opened my eyes, and there's Tim, who's got me by the collar, shaking me. Don't die, don't die, don't die. And he sees that my eyes are open, and he screams, and he's crying, and I thought you were dead, I thought you were dead, I thought you were dead. And he pulls me to my feet, and he's talking to me, and I don't know who he is. I don't know where I am or what I am. I don't understand any of this. All I know is that I'm exiled from this beauty and peace and healing and wholeness, and that I was lost somehow. And that as he's talking, my brain starts to remember, oh, this is me. This is what I'm doing. This is where I am. And Tim gets me to pull the rope, and I pull the rope, and the rope came free, and we descended. And because the parking lot was right across the Icefields Parkway, we had our tent there, and we set up our tent, and we went through the hypothermia process, warming ourselves up slowly before we got in the car with the heater on. And I came back an entirely different person. And I was like living inside of this structure that feels like now like a biological robot that I am inside of, and my software is in the cloud, and I've got like an app inside the body, and I'm seeing myself live, and I'm living above myself. Most of me didn't come back inside. It felt like it expanded into. And so I was now, in the Christian language, born again, and I had a new self. My old self was shattered. I had to learn who I was and how to live, because it wasn't just something that happened to me yesterday. It's something that carried inside of me and changed my perception of myself and everything and everyone around me always. There was no interruption to it. Everything was emitting light. Everything was like watching an old movie on a projector go by you, and you can see the camera light behind it, pushing that screen, that film out, and I could see the light behind all the celluloid, but there was still the celluloid film, which was super thin and not as beautiful and so much less than. And I was hearing inside of me this roar, this constant calling to itself. And from that point on, I lived an entirely different life, and I have ever since, in the same body. After my NDE, my first one, I had a second one in 2015, heart attack. After the first one, I was such a different person. The direction of my life entirely shifted from my family and my expected graduate degree in architecture to divinity school, where I studied mysticism and dove deeply into the ancient texts, both East and West, in order to find if there was anyone in the history of the world who experienced what I had experienced, and how do I manage it? I was looking for tools to manage it. And so I found a set of tools that I've practiced meditation and Kriya yoga and a host of other sorts of deep, mystical, meditative, singular-minded practices, which helped me ground myself back into the divine experience, because I found that I was not functional in the world. And as I tried to function in the world, I could feel all this energy, but I couldn't feel the society that I was stuck inside of. If society itself became superficial to me, an invention of humanity, from language to social norms, all of it was pretend to me. And that I needed to find this space inside myself where I could relate to the real with a capital R. And so I spent my life in interior practice and scholarly pursuit of an understanding of my own journey, but creating an open opportunity for the light inside me to live more fully and wider and broader, so that I could be grounded inside of it. And I found that by leaning into heaven, I found my footing in the world. I couldn't find my footing in the world without leaning into heaven. And I did this for decades, and I did this as a professional. I got talked into becoming a United Church of Christ minister, and I was served 18 years in the pulpit in very difficult churches, where my now natural, mystical, near-death experience was both a challenge and a blessing to the communities that I served. And then I went through 15 years of television. I got recruited to this TV show. I did 15 years of morning broadcasts just before the weather, trying to channel the light itself through stories on these two NBC stations. And when that ended, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, except for the through line through all of this has been this consistent interior journey. Because the deeper I go inside myself, the more I learn to become non-attached to my egoic self, despite the thorn in my side that, Paul talks about in the epistles, of being a human being and still having emotions and traumas and all these things. I dove ever deeper inside myself, and I found that in that space, I found courage and strength and stability and balance and eternity. And through those things, my life has impacted. The light that isn't mine in my life has impacted everyone around me. I kept this a secret for 20 years. The entire time I was a minister, until the very end of it, I kept it a secret, but I lived it every single day and impacted lots of people. I have saved a number of lives, people dying or from suicide, or worked with suicidality. I worked with domestic violence. I worked in the nitty-gritty and the dark areas of human life, trying to bring light and love to people when they most needed it. And so my career, until I got into TV and then thereafter, was all about service and helping to the best of my ability, letting people see that light inside themselves, which has always been my goal. If you see it inside yourself, you don't need me. You don't need a guru. You've got this thing inside you already. You just need to figure out how to find it. And once you find it, it's the pearl of great price. It's the treasure for which you sell everything. I've sold everything for this, everything of my own self. Yeah, definitely. I own things. I got a house. I got a wife. I got a car. I got all sorts of stuff. I got 5 pairs of reading glasses on the desk, but none of them are me. The impact of my life, I went from working in localized community outside the church, mostly in the communities where I lived along the coast of Maine, to television, where I was bringing this light through the lens and the microphone on a daily basis, telling true stories that were fictionalized to protect the guilty and the innocent, for 2 minutes every morning, bringing inspiration. I was trying to bring inspiration to influencing millions and millions of people. I had 30 million views a year on that show. And I wrote this book, which is over my shoulder there. became an Audible bestseller, international Audible bestseller. It got picked up by some major Hollywood producers. I've been working with them for the past 3 years. I'm flying out to LA in December for a producers meeting, my second time. We're in active development. My publisher has agreed to produce a special edition of the book, which include the 7 chapters I wrote for the movie. Basically a prequel and a sequel that creates the totality of the movie, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And they're putting out 50 copies at their expense for scriptwriters, actors, A-list actors, A-list scriptwriters. So they're told, and I could hardly believe this is true. This is what the producers are telling me. I'm like, what? So I'm hoping to spread the message wider. And the thing of it is, it's not my message. It's never been about me. I am a passer through. I'm passing through here. And the message itself is in part the universal nature now of near-death experience across cultures and societies, driven by medical science. There are hundreds of millions of us alive on Earth now, and that doesn't even include all the people who've had mystical experiences of other kinds, to try to help create an atmosphere where we can talk about this in public and have the strength to face whatever. I kept my secret because of ridicule from science, and I'm a total science head. I love science. Science, religion, and society kept me muzzled. I didn't want to be ended up in some kind of insane asylum, having been committed by people who love me for my own good. I want this in the public square. And the more people, if we can make a mass market movie that brings this, that helps, because there's all these books being written about this now, and documentaries being made, and channels on YouTube, the more people that hear about near-death experience, the more people who have had them, who have the courage to speak about it to people that they love, their neighbors and their friends, to get on a camera, to be on a show, to say the truth, to be authentic, to talk about your experience and not try to understand all aspects of it, but to live the thing itself, the unspeakable thing itself, to bring this light into the world. And the more that we bring this light into the world, the more opportunity we have as humanity, because this is an unprecedented thing. Never in the history of the world have there been so many people like us. There've always been near-death experiencers. It's in all the literature and all the world, in smaller bits, but now there's so many of us. If we but speak up, we might have an opportunity to nudge society. I mean, we're in a precarious position. We got more precarious today. Today, the day we're taping this, the world became a little more dangerous. And climate change is a real thing. The tides are rising. There's going to be displacement, droughts, famines, wars. We have an opportunity here. Because when culture is most broken is when change can occur, just like us. When we are at our most broken, that's when we can accept the light inside us. And so now we have this chance as human beings made of light in our origin, and we know it. Anyone who's ever experienced this knows it, and you're undissuadable from it. You can't give it up. Even if you want to, I've tried, I can't. It is the reality itself. And so now we have this chance to channel this light into the world. Not my light, not your light, the light itself, which is so much greater than me. So much greater than me. And I spend my life these days trying to help people integrate their experiences, their near-death experiences, their other kinds of mystical experiences. I did this by myself on my own, because when this first happened to me, like lots of us, there was no internet. Heck, I didn't even know the name of the thing from 80 to 86. It was by 86 that I finally had a name for near-death experience. But to me, it never was, there was nothing near about it. It was death experience. But be that as it may, I love Raymond Moody and the work he's done and is doing. And that we call it near-death experience, which is confusing in the media. Like, I had a near-death experience. I almost got hit by that car. Well, that's not the same thing. So, that aside, we have an opportunity here. And our opportunity is to be the light itself, where we are, with the people we're with, in our frail, broken selves, knowing that we're still going to hurt folk, and knowing that we're still going to love folk, knowing that life is full of challenges and beauty. And I aim here because this is the place of my original self. This is who I actually am. And the more I lean into this space, the bigger the bubble of heaven is in which I live in the world, that I live in. that I experience on a daily basis, moment to moment, the more I empty myself, the larger this heaven bubble becomes in which I am immersed, in which I am, that I am. And the more that happens, the more magical my life becomes, even when it's not so great. And the more impact we have together, because the more of us who understand this light inside ourselves, the more light there is for everyone. And my job here is in part to help people integrate that, help you understand your own experience to the best of your heart and mind, and adjust, because it impacts emotions, psychology, relationships, self-understanding. It impacts, there is nothing that it does not touch. And it's very confusing, and it's not always sweet. It's often, there's dark parts to it. There's hard parts to it. And I'm here to help. I've gone through lots of it. I've had lots of other mystical experiences. I didn't choose, well, in my pre-birth contract, I'm sure that I did, because I had an experience like that. But if I could have done anything else with this life, I would have. Really, truly, I know that that's hard for some folks to hear, but the truth is, I'd rather just be having fun. I'd rather just have a lot of fun, as much fun as I possibly could, all the time. But that's not my task. My task, my purpose, my mission is to help. That's what I'm here for. So my book is Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. And you can find it all over the world at all the different Amazons and lots of different bookstores everywhere. It's on Audible. It's a bestseller on Audible. Had a great reader named Dan Watton who did the reading. Did a fantastic job. You can find all links to that at peterpanagore.love, peterpanagore.love. And book a time with me if you want to talk, if you want to integrate, if you something weird happened in your mystical life, something strange happened in a dream. I'm your guy.
How is this story meaningful to you? If you're watching on YouTube, tell us in the comments. If you're listening to the podcast, leave a review and tell us there. If you or someone you know have a similar kind of story, please also leave that in the comments or send us a message at our website. Maybe we'll feature you. Visit nottheendnde.com. Be blessed and a blessing, my friends.